Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about 1899 episode 4. It is called The Fight. So full spoilers for the episode as always. This one starts off with Jerome. He gets the opening scene and the wake-up call. This is another very good episode. This one was a bit more streamlined. It kind of feels like, now that we've set up all the characters separately, that because they're intermingling a lot more, the episode itself felt a bit more kind of tighter in terms of its overall. It didn't feel as spread out. It felt like everything was kind of feeding into the one central thing that was going on, which was the mutiny and the control of the ship by the part of the crew that rebelled, but also all of the lower decks passengers who kind of took up arms, and all of the moral choices that come up throughout the episode and the histories of the characters, particularly Jerome, but all of it tied back into the themes of the divides, whether that be the class divide, the race divide, the gender divide, and kind of set up some explorations of the choices being made by certain characters who are sympathetic on any of the sides of any of these divides. I think one of the key things that stuck out to me here is that there's characters, let's take the class divide for example. There's characters who are the upper deck passengers, who are the rich or the powerful, who are sympathetic. Clemens really stuck out in this episode as being sympathetic, and obviously there's some who are not, and then there's like really grey area characters, but then you also have on the poor side, who you might think would have more sympathetic characters, and it does to an extent. Jerome's a hugely sympathetic character and was kind of becoming the heart of the show almost in this episode. He's very noble. He has a lot of good intentions. I'll get into that. But then you also have like Cresper and Tove's mother, who becomes this religious zealot kind of figure in this episode and is kind of leading a mob, literally leading a lynch mob in this episode. And it's kind of exploring how anyone, regardless of what group they're either born into or their situation finds themselves in, doesn't necessarily dictate what type of person they are in terms of their moral compass. Obviously it might lean them one way or the other and sort of like force them into a pigeonhole, but ultimately there's strong forces of good from any group potentially. And I think I was getting a lot of that in this episode, and maybe that's what the whole point of this is, testing amongst people. But Jerome is a really strong character to kind of focus this around in this episode, because we find out his backstory with Lucian is, and this is actually, I was speculating back in like episode 2, maybe, whenever it was, that maybe like him and Clemens had a romance and their minds were wiped and they don't remember it. I don't think that's the case anymore. I do still think there's some memory stuff going on with Mara, and that was kind of reinforced a little bit, or at least very still heavy in the potential at the end of the episode. But obviously this very quickly says, no, it's Lucian and Jerome that have got a past together, and they were in the First World War together. I think it was the First World War. And there's trenches, and Lucian, tying into what we already know about his character, took another life for himself. He talked repeatedly in the last couple of episodes about wanting to be successful, wanting to climb that social ladder, be on that side of the social divide. And we kind of see the moment he kind of took his first big step towards it, where he assumed the role of this lieutenant who was dead, and he takes his uniform, and Jerome wants to stop him. Jerome thinks this is wrong. Jerome says, no, we should hold out and do what we're supposed to do. The reinforcements and the supplies will be here soon. And Lucian doesn't want to do that. And this idea of Jerome being this morally good character is sort of held throughout the episode. He always is immediately, you can see it in his face, he's always like thinking about how to try and better the situation. When he's taken to like dispose of the dead bodies with Oleg, they're forced to throw all these dead bodies, there's a big pile of them off the side of the ship, starting with Ada. He's immediately thinking, what can I do to get out of this? How can I be proactive and do something about this situation? And when he does run away and he runs into Clemens, he kind of just goes to that room naturally to hide, and she ends up wanting to help him. She keeps choosing to like help. She leaves with him, and then when the bigger group get together and they're going to try and go to the Prometheus. They don't know it's not there anymore. This group's not privy to that information yet. In fact, they still aren't by the end, that I think about it. I'm sure they'll find out soon enough. But she's like, I'm coming too. She wants to come and help. So I think what stuck out to me, there's several moments in this episode where she runs up and hugs Jerome because they think he's dead for a little bit after he gets shot, and she runs up and hugs him when he comes to like free all the prisoners who are being held because they didn't go along with the mutiny, whether they're other members of the crew or some of the upper class or even lower class passengers who are in this room being held. Clemens hugs him, and she runs up instinctively and just does it. And then during the big fight towards the end, they have this like moment where they're close, and that's when Lucian sees them and has realized that he's here because he freaked out about the medal and is holding a gun up to him and says, "You can't trust the thing he says." What stuck out to me about all this is that Clemens, I think there is an attraction to Jerome, and I think the more it goes on, I think the reason why she's attracted to Jerome is because he is fundamentally a good character. And I think she is also, too, a sympathetic character who is probably quite... This is kind of why I'm saying she's one of the key examples of the upper class passengers who is good. Obviously, she's not a person who has ultimate power, though. I mean, she was kind of like forced into this marriage, seemingly. And that's been brought up repeatedly. This was an arranged marriage. So she clearly... And this maybe goes into the gender divide as opposed to the social divide and how these divides are everywhere. But I think she sees qualities in Jerome that are worthy of being attracted to, right? That are attractive. Qualities that Lucian does not have. Lucian, I said, was a little more sympathetic last episode. I think he's less sympathetic now. Because we see what he does in the flashback to Jerome, and we see, that he steals this identity, and we see that he's trying to cover up and try to effectively gaslight Jerome and try and make sure Clemens doesn't think he's worth trusting or anything like that at the end. But I think all the things that he's not, Jerome is. No, and I don't mean rich and powerful, because that's obviously what Lucian wanted the whole time. But this idea that he is noble, he has a good moral compass, and he tries to do the right thing. He's a heroic character, right? He's a hero fundamentally. And that is something I think Clemens sees in him, and even if she doesn't really realize it all yet, she's attracted to that, and I think that's why there's a chemistry there. And to be fair, the reason why I had that theory that maybe they knew each other before is the second they saw each other, there was some chemistry. And would you really recognize that the first time you see a person before you really see them act or do anything? It's a bit of a fictional romantic thing, but it has sort of proven itself throughout his actions and what she's seen him do. She's seen him try to step in when the others come to take the boy from them. He isn't going to let that happen. He tries to intervene, and that's when he gets shot. He says the boy is innocent. Now, in this particular case, the boy's creepy enough that the audience aren't sure if the boy's completely innocent or if he's even really a boy, or there could be any number of things here because it's a TV show. But from his perspective, he is protecting a child who this lynch mob has decided needs to die because they believe he's the devil or something. So it's a very heroic quality. It makes you want to root for him. And then he when he goes and breaks everyone else out, the speech he gives is, "We can't let this lynching happen. We have to go save him. We have to go do the right thing." So this episode was a big success story for Jerome as far as winning over the audiences, I think, because he cares, he wants to do the right thing, he's constantly trying to inspire others to do that, and we kind of are forming this group of characters who are better. Ramiro's with the captain and they team up with Clemens and Jerome. It doesn't last very long, of course, but a lot of them are still together. Clemens is separate at the end, but they're all together in the dining room where they've kind of held up. It kind of feels like we're sort of separating the maybe the most important divide that's more real in a way is the divide of just better people and people who are not. And that's not necessarily a firm line. People can become better, they can grow, they can learn, and they can find redemption. That's not a harsh line that's going to forever be there. But I feel like we're starting to kind of learn who the good people are on any of the groups that we're seeing. And I think there's some other good little character bits for Jerome. So the whole idea of this medal that he left behind that Lucian freaks out about, when we see the flashback, which is triggered by the gunshot, which again was another like, it was kind of frozen until someone hit play again, kind of like last episode. But he is given this medal by Lucian. Lucian thinks he's giving him, like, doing him a favor. Like, so he's locked him up. He knocked him out and locked him up because he wasn't going to go along with this lieutenant plan. So he's locked him up. He's going to tell the superiors that he was a deserter, and he'll believe him, right? It doesn't say because he's like a white lieutenant and this guy's, Jerome's black, but maybe you can infer that from like who they're going to believe. Like, he kind of says it that way. And it kind of like, it comes across as this like pitiful thing where he's like, here, take the medal, you'll be in prison for a bit, but you can trade this, you can use this to barter or something. And he gives him the medal, and Jerome doesn't want to take it. And again, it speaks to Jerome's character and his integrity that he never traded it, because he still had it. He returned it to Lucian in the show. He kept it on him to show that he never used it, because he's not going to, as best as he can, he's not going to do the wrong thing if he knows it's wrong. And I thought that was a really strong character touch that I really, because I watched the episode twice and it really stuck out in the second viewing. Just some of these like character beats with Jerome kind of like just all coming up. So you've got this like idea that Lucian thinks he's doing him a favor, and he'll understand, he'll be glad that I gave him this later on, but he's like, no, he never used it. So I think this all comes back to, again, there's a line that Jerome has early in the episode when he first runs into Clemence in her room, and this ties into a line from another scene that isn't too long before it, actually. But he says he's seen this kind of thing before. So even now in this moment, he's trying to like, we have to try and like solve this mutiny problem. We have to deal with this, right? He's not just trying to run and save his own, ass. He's trying to like figure out the problem, because he says, I've seen this kind of thing before, and I'm just looking for the exact line. I grab for power always ends badly. That's what he says. And that's what's happening. And that ties into the themes we've been talking about divides. We have the poor lower decks class, by and large, are the ones who are now with weapons and controlling the ship and searching and ransacking the rich passengers' rooms. And like, is this power going to go to their head? And all that stuff. But that idea, that's what Franz is doing as well. Franz, obviously not one of the poor passengers on the ship, but he's taking command, he's taking control. And in the same way that Lucian just became a lieutenant because he decided to take the jacket and be one, Franz is kind of taking the captain's chair, if you will, by simply, staging this mutiny. And that's why, the reason why I thought of connecting those two things is because obviously this is a power grab and Jerome's, calling it that, but also because in a scene with Franz, Mara says to Franz that, you're not the man you think you are, you're just a little boy toying with power. And it made me think of the power grab line as well. Like I those two went together in my head, and I was kind of thinking them together. So that's really good stuff as far as like writing an episode of TV goes. Those thematic things linking up between the different characters and the different plots and ideas. I think that's really strong. This might be the strongest episode overall. It doesn't have the coolest moment. The end of episode 2 is probably still the coolest moment of the show. But I think as a rating goes, as a full episode that feels like a full meal, this episode feels the strongest to me. And all the Jerome stuff is basically that. That was kind of the driving force of it, and such a good character beat for him throughout. And there's all these little nuggets throughout that just kind of builds and enhances the type of person he is, and then naturally who teams up with him and sees something in him are the other good characters, by and large. So to talk about the, I mentioned, we have the lower deck passengers in power now. We have Crester and Tove's mother, who claims she can hear the voice of God. The father talks about that in a scene. And again, actually, speaking of, the good and bad on every line of the divides, Tove doesn't want to be a part of the witch hunt. Tove even criticizes Crester for wanting to do this, and criticizes that Cresters always try to seek approval from their mother, even though she is awful to him. He's always seeking the approval. And it leads to a big scene where they're searching the rooms and they go to Angel's room. And when Angel knows who Crester is, the mother like demands to know why, and Crester is terrified. He can't even speak. He just doesn't say anything. And clearly the mother puts some of this together. Given that Tove also spoke to him in a certain way before, clearly he's got a history of this. And she says something really awful to him. I wish he took you instead of Ada, meaning God, I assume. But she's a complete religious nut job in this episode. She is leading this witch hunt, and one of the things that it got me to thinking about, again thinking of these divides, is that the idea that the poor, because they're not that in control of the world around them, because they're poor, naturally have already turned to religion to try and seek comfort in the lack of control, whereas the rich and the upper deck passengers, like when something happens out of their control, they're out. Not that the poor aren't outraged, because they were outraged that the ship was being turned back, but they're outraged in a different way, and they're outraged in a way that it leads to kind of fear. Whereas because the lower deck passengers, at least a lot of them, seem to have already like bought into religion, they kind of like just lean into that even heavier, which is naturally what leads to this witch hunt, because they want something to blame. So they blame this child, and ultimately it was the first mate Sebastian who tells them about the kid and leads them on this path. And I've there's some questions here about like how much he knows, because he was the one who put in the triangle things and the device last episode. But this witch hunt, again, it's this idea of like they're seeking some form of control. They want to feel like they're doing something to solve their problem, even though it seems like it's just a made up, like we've decided this kid's the villain, and maybe he is. Like it's a TV show, we don't know, but they've decided this. They want control. They want to feel like they're in control, and this is like what's going to make them feel better. And that's quite scary. A mob is a scary thing. When a mob is decided to believe something, and it's hard. I found myself hating this mother character this episode, and you're supposed to. I think it reminded me a lot of a character from The Mist. This sort of as time goes on and people are getting more scared, more people start buying into her like rhetoric, and she sort of builds a following. Here it's already kind of built in, but it doesn't take a lot for them to start going after things. So, and yeah, like she throws the kid overboard. We get this big fight scene where good characters try to take on the mob, and she just throws this kid overboard like it's nothing. Now the kid obviously doesn't seem, he's not acting too scared. And one of the big things to sort of dive into the mystery side of the episode is that when they go to search Maura's room the first time, he's not there, and it's because he's hiding in the secret compartment, the tiled shaft that the captain's room has. Her room also has, and it's like, okay, how many of the rooms have these things? Do they all have them? And she questions what the purpose of these things are. And I was thinking about it, and my guess right now is that they are respawn points, maybe, or something. So the reason why my mind jumped there is that when the captain woke up inside his tiled shaft, it was after that sort of flashback scene where he was like looking at his daughter on fire and the house was on fire, and not so much that I think he died in that scene, but he ended up in there because if they're in a simulation, it teleported him to that, because that's like your safe spawn point where you then emerge from. And I'm thinking, so the big thing that happened at the end obviously is the kid just came out of the cupboard door in front of everyone in the dining hall. There was this light behind the door, and he steps out, and I was wondering, is there another one of these tiled shafts behind that door? I know it doesn't look like the door from the hatches in the rooms, but I'm just wondering if there's a similar thing back there. Like, is that what all of these things are, where they can just, that's where they'll wake up? If someone who's not supposed to die yet dies, they'll appear there. And if that's not the case by standard, I did, because there's a scene where Daniel goes and tinkers with the machine that's in the engine room, and we don't really know what he's doing or what it's affecting, but I do wonder if him going down there to tinker with that was because he knows they're after the kids, so he's like sort of setting up that he's going to like just be safely taken somewhere else. Or if the kid's not actually a child and he's something else, is it just a case of, oh, he just respawns there because he's not actually a person in reality? I don't know. I'm going wild with these theories, and I it's definitely provoking my mind to think of them, which is nice. But yeah, I actually had to laugh though, because the scene where Daniel goes down to like tinker with the machine, the two like guys down there who were talking about Wills before, one of them was wearing garlic around his neck, which I thought was great because it felt like a reference to that Dracula chapter that I brought up before, because that's obviously a vampire story. But there's a funny conversation here about wolves and vampires and whether or not they exist. It's just kind of an amusing scene. What gave me a chuckle though is that it cut to Daniel sneaking about in the background, and Daniel, because he keeps walking around with that pop collar on his like black coat, it made me think, you look like you kind of look like you're cosplaying a vampire. I don't think he actually is a vampire, but it looks like he's cosplaying a vampire. It's like half cosplaying vampire, half doing his best impression of Rufus Sewell in Dark City. That's what it kind of looks like when he's sauntering around in that coat. But that's what it made me think of. So yeah. Also, the compasses are working again, and the part of the crew that are in control of the ship are aware that they've moved somewhere. And they're moving the ship west because that's where their direction is. Although I don't think they know for sure they're even still in the Atlantic Ocean, to be honest. They could be on the Pacific Ocean, so they're moving towards like Asia for all they know. I don't know. But maybe there'll be more to that in the coming episodes. But yeah, all this mystery stuff was interesting. And again, the kid just appearing in front of everyone. I think what I liked about the kid appearing again, what made it a cool ending, because they've had these big endings for every episode. I think this is probably the second best one behind the TV screens in episode 2. And I think the reason why this one was as cool as it is because it happens in front of an entire crowd. I think if he respawned like this in front of no one, or in front of just Mara, I would have said it was not bad, but I wouldn't have been as into it. I think what made it feel like a big deal and what made it feel kind of bold is that he did it in front of like all of these characters. Like Jerome's there, Ramiro's there, like the captain's there. Like all these characters are there and see it. So there's no disputing that something supernatural or science fiction-y just happened. Obviously I don't know what they're going to theorize themselves. The kid's not talking, he just hugs Mara at the end, and Daniel's reaction to all this is quite interesting. Daniel comes and like kind of rescues Mara from the crowd. He doesn't look happy. He looks kind of stoic about the whole thing, but there's kind of a discomfort about all this. Like he's kind of uncomfortable, but he was expecting this and he knows why he's back. So that's all very interesting. There is a moment where he like sort of tries to comfort Mara by putting his hand on her arm. There's always the possibility they'll swerve us with this and say that this is a romantic partner rather than her brother, because we don't really know but the brother was mentioned, so it's natural for us to think it's the brother rather than a romantic partner. Her reaction though to being confronted with her name on the passenger list of the Prometheus was interesting. She says this is impossible, which certainly implies that she did not expect her name to be there, but it does mean something to her. I don't know, her reaction felt weighted to me. It didn't just feel like, wait, that doesn't make sense. It wasn't just confusion, it was like, this is impossible. That was the line she had. So it feels like a bigger deal than that, would be my guess. But yeah. But no, that was interesting. I really feel that this episode was a culmination of the first half of the show. The fight, of course, included most of the characters, so it felt like everyone coming together, but it really felt like everyone's starting to be in on it, and I think it's actually starting to feel more fun because we have groups of characters together who I'm starting to root for a little bit, which is nice. I'm starting to like sort of realize who the good people are on the ship. and I kind of enjoy that. And them all witnessing this like event, or not all of them, but like a lot of them witnessing this event with the kid appearing again at the end is kind of a big deal, and it feels monumentous because of that. And I'm excited to see what their reactions are to this, and what are the reactions of the others when they find out. Like the religious mother, when she finds out this kid's back, she probably is going to be convinced he's the devil at this point. I mean, like, what else is she going to think now? But yeah, like I said, it really sets up a lot of these ideas of like who's sympathetic and who's not. I kind of glossed over Crester a little bit actually, because Crester is trying to seek the approval of his mother and even spits in Angel's face. It's hard to feel super sympathetic for Angel because it does feel like he uses people, but he is also constantly being he is hiding his life a lot from people. He's seeing here how Crester's being treated by his family for who he is, and it does feel like a genuine moment where he's trying to reach out to him here against his mother, and Crester of course spits in his face. He makes this choice, but the whole time it kind of feels like Crester's not necessarily, because Tove even says to him, this isn't you can't be a part of this, you can't side with them, you're better than this. But Crester does ultimately help. He's the one who leads them to the boy because he sees the boy with Mara. He does these bad things, and it does kind of feel a little bit sad. Like, he maybe should be better than this, but he's making these bad choices because of the people around him. The person who is in power over him, his mother. Again, that's another power divide. One that's even different from all the other ones I've said, which is this parental power that is negative, even though they're both on the same side of the social divide. So that's another interesting element, is the idea of like maybe being a little sympathetic, or at least empathetic, as to why some of the characters are making the bad choices they've made, and the reasons why they have maybe made mistakes and put themselves in certain situations. Some of them feel like they've been influenced by others, like Ramiro being influenced by Angel, Crester by his mother, so on and so on. I'm sure there's other examples that we can probably get to if we go through it. And then there's characters who are trying to maintain their morals no matter what, and like we can sort of get behind some of those characters because of that. So yeah, really good episode. I actually think this is the best episode. It doesn't have the best moment of the show, but I think it's the best episode from a character and rating perspective, because it really felt like it solidified who I want to root for in this episode. And even if there's elements of some of the characters that are still mysterious, like Franz saying the captain's not who you think he is, so yeah, maybe there's a bad element to him that we still have to discover. It does feel like he's ultimately trying to do the right thing right now. I'm curious to see what we do with more of these characters now that we've really established them, and I'm starting to get behind some of them and starting to really not get behind some of the other ones, and some of the points that I might make because of that. But yes, I feel like I'm rambling at this point, so I'll wrap it up there. But good stuff. Oh, I'll just mention 2 points here. One, I completely forgot in episode 1 to talk about the scene where they all drink tea at the same time in the dining room. Probably the first big hint that there was something weird about the world that they're in, and that something's not quite right. There was just so much to talk about in that first episode, I completely forgot about it. It just ties into maybe all the things we've been saying about it possibly being some sort of simulation or whatever, or some sort of shared dream state, or the other thing is just a brief note on the music. I know the music's been a bit divisive, not so much the score, but the songs that have been playing, where some people think they feel out of place. I can kind of see why people are feeling that way. They don't really bother me too much, though. They kind of work well enough. Like Don't Fear the Reaper playing at the end of this episode, it felt fine tonally with what's going on. And I kind of see the out of time period music feeling like a hint about what's really going on, to be honest. The idea that really we're actually much further ahead in time, and this world is taking place within another time period. But what I would say is that the opening title music does suck. Like the cover of the song that plays over the opening titles is not good. And I don't really like the opening title sequence because of that, which is a shame because I love Dark's opening title music, and I always listen to it every episode. With this, I don't really, if I'm looking at something for a minute, I'll let it play. Otherwise, I'll skip it. But yeah, so yeah, just some thoughts. But yeah, so no, really strong episode. Really setting up these divides. And the divide that's the most important being which characters are inherently good people that we want to root for, and which characters who are doing bad things could be good people, and just need the right influence, need the right encouragement, or whatever, right circumstances perhaps. But anyway, that's my thoughts on episode 4 of 1899. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All those things help out the channel a lot. And of course, you can support us financially by hitting the super thanks button. They're going to be at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us on a monthly basis to help keep all the content coming. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?